So I'm thrilled to have some time here with you guys this morning. I know how valuable time is to everyone, so I really appreciate it, Media Post. I'm excited to be here. That said, we don't have a lot of time, but I do have a lot of videos, so we're just gonna kind of jump right into it here. So this deck was originally built back in 2022. That's when Anamorphic first hit the US streets. It was in Europe first, most of the cool shit is, then it makes its way over here. So we've been presenting this deck ever since. Of course, we've been iterating, updating, keeping up with the trends, but what we found is that the core fundamental truths and principles behind the screens, behind the technology, behind how you can kind of frame it to help yourself get in a position to brainstorm have really remained the same. So we've most recently presented this to a creative agency 2 weeks ago. We have versions that range from 10 minutes to over an hour, so it just really depends on the conversation that we're trying to have. So today, we're gonna keep it pretty tight around the fundamentals, which is really like the first part of the deck, and then we could build from there with some other things. So why build a deck in the first place and keep presenting it? So whether they were saying it or not, we realized that very quickly in 2022, everyone's excited, right? The clients are excited, creative agencies, we're thrilled, let's go. We start having conversations, start taking meetings, we start thumbing through media kits, really trying to understand this. And some were saying it, some were not saying it, but there was this feeling of confusion. It was overwhelming, it was a little intimidating. And when they weren't saying it, we could tell because they were shying away from the opportunity. And we just wanted everyone to kind of have a fair shake, especially when this was exploding in the beginning. You got a small window to be kind of the first out there, and we really wanted to give our clients this opportunity. And really, when we started to dig into it, we found that it was just being severely overcomplicated, especially in the language being used. So we went on a deep dive and sought to really simplify it for our clients because confusion should never be a barrier to entry. So that's what we're here to do today, is just share our homework. We really simplify it and break it down, oversimplify it in some context. So we're gonna go through the quick history. We're gonna go back into the technique. Cough, cough, wink, wink. It did not start in digital out of home. This existed way prior. Then we're gonna talk about some fundamentals. We're defining that here today as building a foundation and setting up some guardrails so that we build this pretty tight sandbox to allow you to brainstorm within. That's what clients and creative agencies do best, and we want to allow them to brainstorm and brand storytell and not get overwhelmed in kind of the details, and then we'll kind of tie it all together in the end. So this has been kind of the consistent feedback that we've gotten when we presented this deck over the years. There tends to be something in here for everyone, so even if you are pretty familiar, again, it's going to be overly simplified, but there's usually something in here for everyone to take away. So really our simple goal is that everyone walks away feeling a little bit more like this today versus some of the feelings that we mentioned before. So first, the quick history. So this existed all the way back in the Renaissance. That's when the first records of this existed. Leonardo da Vinci, which I had to practice a lot to not say Leonardo DiCaprio, kept slipping out, so I just had to. Leonardo da Vinci and his works around the construction of the eye are the first documented source of this. It was anamorphosis at the time, anamorphous, and then now we call it anamorphic. Then in the Renaissance, it was adopted really in two ways. It was done on walls and massive paintings and artworks to really immerse the patrons into the scriptures themselves and kind of break those walls a little bit and have them feel a little more involved. It was also used to cheat architecture. That was its primary use. So where there weren't budgets to do elaborate cathedrals and domes on some of these places of worships, they would cheat it from the inside. So the image you're looking at here, there's actually not arches and domes within the building. They use this technique to start to fake that. We're skipping a lot of beats here, but fast forward 20th century, now we have street art. We have organic street art, we have commissioned street art, but really it all boils down to that same immersive 3D effect. And then again, skipping a couple beats, but just to tap into the art world again, we have modern art. So we have these suspended, seemingly random objects, but when viewed and twisted in the right perspective, almost like magic, they come together to form this perfect image. Not the first time we've stolen from the art world. Makes a lot of sense though, right? Like we are the IRL canvas, so it makes sense that we would steal from the artists that were doing this on the original canvases. So just to really tie this together for folks that are a little less familiar with the space, we have the Sistine Chapel, Michelangelo, first, most famous ceiling painting. This got adapted into the art world, it's been used in cheeky ways. Like even right now, if you open up Amazon and start to Google wallpaper for your ceiling, you'll see a lot of things that look like this that you can do in your home, in out of home. Before we were talking about digital, I know that's what we're here to talk about today. It used to be a lot of, if you could put a sticker on it, where can you put a sticker, that type of thing. It was a static format. Ceilings work fine too for this. It became pretty popular in immersive environments. So transit, there was longer dwell times, a little tighter environment. So it was just another canvas to put the consumers in an immersive experience. And like most things these days, what was static is now going digital. In 2024, Europe launched the largest ceiling digital in the world to date. Also takes anamorphic, so just goes to show you that these experiences are getting a lot more elaborate as we go on, and we're really taking advantage of every surface that we can. So now if you were reading before, a little bit more complicated technical terms, now this breaks it down a little bit more of a simplistic narrative, easier to understand. You're hitting on these key beats. So really the most important is this was always considered high tech for its time. That's where we're at today. But in terms of what we're here to talk about, which is digital out of home, really all you have to know, Anamorphic is 3D and digital out of home. It creates an impactful illusion of 3D in real life. We don't have to overcomplicate it. It's as simple as that. Everyone should have just said that from the first place. But if you are feeling a little intimidated, hopefully you're feeling like you can come back out of the bush and kind of join the little brainstorming conversation. We also threw a couple of words here at the bottom. You'll hear these from time to time. Some vendors took these on as, their company names. So same. But anamorphic is really what our industry has kind of coined and hung its hat on. So when we're talking about anamorphic, really what we're talking about is the manipulation of these three simple tactics. So light and lighting, shadow, perspective. So no matter how low tech, hand paints, static, to how high tech, a high impact, full motion, digital screen, we're really just manipulating these simple factors. And when it's done in the right way, you don't need any fancy eyewear, QR codes, anything extra to gain the right effect. And in digital outdoor, from a technical requirements, and we have a little asterisk here, so I'll get to that, but the only technical requirement is that the inventory is full motion capable. So you don't have to ask every time, we don't have to answer every time, does this take anamorphic? If it's full motion capable, yes. Now, is it allowed? That's another question to ask. Some boards do not allow it for safety, security reasons, right? It's over a high traffic street. Should it take anamorphic? Another question we should ask ourselves sometimes, like just because you can doesn't always mean you should. But on the technical side, yes, it can. And then the last piece is in terms of submissions, much bigger file, not more complicated from a submission standpoint than a standard digital out-of-home file. So same submission, same lead time. So to give us a quick example, we're gonna play two quick videos and I'll kind of walk you through these as they play. These are the only ones I'll talk over, the other ones will have sound. You'll get a break. So these two, I went with a little Halloween example. So we're talking about skulls here. So here's an example back from the Renaissance, just to give you an idea of how and where this started, as well as give you a static example. So what you're seeing here, originally in the bottom, you could not tell what this object was. Looking at this, it looked random, it looked like a mistake, but when you get to the exact right perspective, all of a sudden you're able to clearly see the image that was intended, and it was a skull in the bottom of the painting. This is the ambassadors. It was one of the earlier uses, one of the most famous uses of the technique. Now fast forward to now, we have a digital screen in New York using anamorphic with the skull popping out. So what you'll notice here is there's not one required vantage point, there's an ideal vantage point. So just because one is more optimal, though, doesn't mean that there's less or more optimal versions. There are. So in this video, we kind of dance around and look at different perspectives, and you're still able to clearly see the image and the intended experience. And then here's just another example. This is probably one of my favorite examples. It was one of the first examples that kind of hit the streets in LA. It's pretty best in class. It's simple. There's a very clear hero in this story. The hero is at the optimal point of view for the viewer, and all of the additional elements that pop out and help highlight and story flow through all highlight and bounce out at that optimal point of view, as well as circle around the hero. So super simple, done really, really well. And this has been in since the first deck. There's no reason to switch it out when it's done right? All right, so now breaking it down to categories. There's really 3 different types of anamorphic. Again, we're oversimplifying here, but we have screen geometry. That means we're really paying attention to the size, shape, orientation, and playing off the screen itself. We have volumetric containers, so think inward dimension or creating a room. And then we have outward dimension. So think popping out, outward motion. If you're a theater or film person, breaking the fourth wall. We also like to call it breaking the screen if we're trying to explain it a little more literally. There's also really 3 screen orientations. Are there more complex versions of this? Absolutely. There's multi-screen formats, there's larger, there's slightly different shapes, but really 90+% of the screens that are out there will fall into one of these 3 categories, and these are important to understand when you're trying to build out, or if you have an idea in mind and you're trying to find the best place to fit it. So we have flat screens. It's like it sounds, right? It's on one dimension. It's usually up against a building. If it's a high impact screen, it needs it for that structure and support. This is also a bulletin. So we have a full motion bulletin for a freestanding example, flat screen. There's 2 types of corner screens. We have a squared edge and we have a rounded edge. The squared edge tends to be more optimal if your goal is to create inward dimension primarily and a room, whereas a corner rounded screen, regardless of how far it extends on either of the sides, tends to be the best for outward dimension. Now, while these are optimal, what you'll see in a lot of the examples that we're about to show is really the best-in-class examples leverage multiple of these techniques. These are just important to keep in mind if there's a main priority. So, for example, one that we did through Canvas, we have Creed over here in the corner. So in the main thing we wanted to feature, big moment of the film, we're at the event, he's boxing, it's the outward punch. So what you can see though, however, is that the inward space was still used to leverage more space to make the outward punch feel that much big and grand, and created a world and a scene for the character. It's highlighted right in that right optimal viewing point, very clear hero, but everything else complements it really well without interrupting the story. The other thing to consider between the flat and the corners is the optimal range of view. If you're a flat screen, you're going to want to be pretty head-on to get that optimal experience. And as you start to halo away from that, it becomes less and less optimal pretty quickly. So there's some pretty drastic fall off there. If you're at a rounded screen, your range for the optimal view is much more generous, and then it will start to optimal perspective fall off again, but it will happen in a little bit more of a gradual and more forgiving way. So here's a quick sizzle with a bunch of examples. You'll see all the screen types in here. Again, a 2022 example, that was intentional. I think it just goes to show that when the fundamentals are layered properly and used in the right space, that it does work well. So if you focus on these core elements, and we're not getting into best practices today, not quite enough time for that, but just like these fundamental understandings, like you don't necessarily have to be a creative to think creatively as long as you understand some of these guardrails. So there's been evolutions in screens. I already told you there were 3 since the time we first created the deck. The sphere came, and now we have round screens. 1 right now, supposedly more to come. And you'll notice in this example how all 3 tactics are leveraged pretty well. The sphere tends to be good for inward dimension, but can also be good for the other ones in a nice balance.
I know you're ready. You've got this.
Wake the up, samurai. We have a city to burn.
Let's go!
Something you'll also notice in this video is highly overly produced, right? So we have something that's pretty professionally done. We're not just highlighting the screen, we're going in and out of the world of the characters in the game itself. We're also going in and out of the world of Las Vegas, where the screen is located. So in a couple of different ways, we're anchoring and orienting the viewer, and that's really okay in this instance. It's entirely fine to do it 100% for the gram. Quite often, one location will be contracted, at least originally, some things are changing now, to use it as essentially a production set to garner social extension. So now we're buying one location, we're paying a decently hefty production fee, although that's gone down as well. But now we're garnering like global reach from this one location. So it just really extends where the story can be done and leveraged. Often it's not reliance totally on user-generated content. We're really doing produced shorts, and a lot of times those are re-rendered versus actually being filmed on site. So a little bit of a mix, but just to point out that that is a tactic and it's done quite often. Also, we've had evolutions of tech. So as I mentioned before, when we're talking about the range of view and the point of view, and here's like the least forgiving of the original screens is a flat screen. In the advances and the recent technology, and this is pretty new as of this year, at least to us, so what they were able to do was take that optimal vantage point and create a halo of optimal vantage points, which means now you don't have to be directly head on. You can be a little to the left, a little to the right, and it's built out for the point of view of where you're standing so that you're experiencing the astronaut or the giraffe head as you should be. Still a screen. It's still an optical illusion, not quite magic. So if you're standing right next to the screen, nothing's actually coming out. It's still going to peter off, and there's going to be those less optimal perspectives. But this was a pretty big game changer for environments that you needed a little more expansion to have the opportunity to truly do this. And then in addition to that, there's been some other advances. So we can talk about this not just existing in full motion. It really started full motion high impact screens. It transitioned to full motion or limited motion reach and frequency formats like transit shelters. This now can be decently easily resized so that your campaign can have pretty good scale but not have a tremendous production budget. It also to some degrees can exist in static, and that's that caveat from earlier. The reason there's a caveat is technically the static file is still built from what's originally a full motion file that's frozen and captured in high res and used for the static creative ultimately on the other side. So now if your priority is to have an anamorphic campaign, you have the ability to extend it to digital bulletins. A 14 by 48 is most of the bulletins out there. That's one file. And now you have the ability to range this to be full market scale, or go multi-market, or go national. And out of home, that's 10 markets plus. So scale that however you'd like from there. Which just gives this tremendous reach and just further helps justify the production budgets, which again have kind of gone down from the original. And then last, because it will probably come up in questions, yes, you can do this also programmatically, just giving it that much more scale. So it's about resizing and finding the right opportunities. We'll go really quickly through this piece. This just kind of ties it all together. So this is not a Canvas client. We did not get this brief. We took some liberties here, but please just indulge for the ease of the explanation. But if we did get a brief, it probably went a little something like this. We're Coca-Cola. We want to do a Christmas campaign. Our target market is New York City. We know we have a tagline. The holidays are magic when we share them. And we know we want to leverage this new cool thing, Anamorphic, that's happening. So we want to feature probably a family, maybe a mom and a son. We want to showcase a gift. We want to highlight the holidays. Red is a nice color for all of this. I love New York, the colors of Christmas, the colors of Coca-Cola. So how can we use this but also keep it lighthearted? It's going to be animated. And then moving into it, how do we pick our media format? So if you look down in the lower right, when the planners were selecting this, they were probably looking at how can we build out something and what's the look and feel? We're not going to make it look like a house in the suburbs. We're going to make it look like an apartment in New York City. How do we make the story flow super dynamic and interesting? Can we find a multi-screen unit? So now we can have the screens interact with one another and have the mom, the son each have their moment, and it's the Coca-Cola that brings them together maybe. And then in terms of process, here's just a sample. Obviously, there's a lot of storyboarding. Like, think about it like a short film. That's what it is, right? So the big difference here, 2022, 11 plus weeks. Fast forward to 2025, we're looking at 6 to 8 weeks as a comfortable average that a lot will give you. Some vendors are going to give you even less lead time than this to go to market with Anamorphic, just making it that much more accessible because I'm not sure everyone's experience on the creative lead times, but we're usually really, really pushing it close to the end. So it just makes it a lot more possible for everyone. And then here is, hopefully this plays, the end campaign for Coca-Cola. There's some nice Christmas music playing in the background. It's not up, but I think you get the sense. So here we have the mom starting downstairs, the kid upstairs. They each have their own little spaces. You can see all the little Coca-Cola Easter eggs, which are kind of fun throughout the ad itself. So they really kind of played up the brand in a subtle way, really highlighting that moment that they wanted, and then just making it a clear Christmas ad at the end with a subtle ad of the gift. Some stats. So these are some nice, some numbers here to show you that, yes, it does work. What I really want to highlight, though, is a little bit of a vanity disclaimer. So we have to think about why media is contracted sometimes, and at least initially, like this was really contracted for vanity, for PR, for splashy, for social extension. So because of the reasons it was contracted, also the impressions thresholds that were hit, prohibited, limited, or there was just no interest in doing a study because it was achieving what they objectively, anecdotally wanted to achieve. There's a little bit more studies now. A lot of folks are asking for numbers. So there's some studies that just speak to 3D resonating more than 2D. And then there are some others that are a little more campaign specific. They're still admittedly few and far between, like for that reason. The most consistent measure has been more around the social reach. So how far was it, and did it hit who they intended? How long did it take? Those types of things. So just like a little disclaimer there if you're looking for more numbers. Right on time. Thank you.
All right, what questions do you have on 3D and anamorphic?
Spencer Gattinello, Broadsign. Do you find that the location is picked first, or the execution and idea, and then you have to go find the location as the agency?
We've experienced a mix. It's a little more driven by which client it is. Oftentimes, some of the more, like we have theatrical clients, they might have an idea in mind. We're looking to bring it to life. There's other times, which is probably percentage-wise more often, where we're in charge of the media plan, and we might even be bringing Anamorphic to them as a concept. So our priority first and foremost is the integrity of the media placements, and then understanding we might want to work this into the plan kind of plays a factor and is where we kind of go in and arts and science it a little bit and tweak it, or have options, right? Like if you want to do Anamorphic, here's plan A. If you don't want to do Anamorphic, this might be plan B.
Question right back here.
Oh, kind of a fun question, I guess. But these things, executions look so cool. You know, do you ever have any anecdotal stories about accidents being caused because people are just staring at these things, or just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Never buy a Canvas ad, I can say that. No, I'm just kidding. So to date, there hasn't been any major news stories or feedback that has happened. They're pretty cautious, overly cautious usually about where they put these first. And it started where you would think, right? Like most things are tested in Times Square. There's no vehicular traffic there. There's a little less danger bumping into someone versus vehicular, different, right? And that's also the placement. We have static billboards, not full motion billboards. So if the vendors are concerned or the city is concerned, it can come from one or the other. And often it's the municipalities that drive it. Then even though it is possible, they'll turn that feature off.
I guess I'm curious because this is very arresting, right? Like it captures attention. Is there a best practice around like the length of time for the animation loop?
So we're pretty beholden to the loops that exist. So a lot of the spot lengths are like, we're lucky if we get a 15-second spot length. Usually they're a little less than that unless we're contracting a longer experience and building it out. But that's why it's important to have a very clear one hero of the story so that you have enough time to capture the consumer's attention. You also don't want these spots to be too long. So even going longer than 15 seconds or maybe pushing it to isn't always recommended, because you want to hit that sweet spot of the consumer catching it, experiencing it, but not having too long to think about it or pull it apart, and just make it part of like the natural motion. So they shouldn't have to necessarily stop and watch. They should be able to kind of enjoy on the move and on the go. The one exception there is the sphere. So that originally was a 90-second spot. That was the standard spot length. It was designed for that purpose. They thought that was the sweet spot to storytell. This year or late last year, it was reduced down to a 60 based on the feedback that they were getting. So it does adjust based on the consumer's reactions as well as what works best for the advertisers. So we're just constantly tweaking it.
All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.